It's time for another episode of the Arkham Sessions. I'm Brian Ward, and with me as always is the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. Everyone welcome, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Mr. Brian Ward.
We had a lot of emails over the last couple of weeks regarding our most recent episode, Batman and Harley Quinn. Turns out there are a lot of people out there who feel the same way we did. So while we apologize for you having to listen, we're glad that you're encouraged that we felt the same way and even got to hear a little something that was informative and entertaining. In fact, someone who got a number of pleasant shout outs was our good friend and the guest of that episode, Penguin Gone Mad herself, Lauren Ritchie. So thank you, Lauren, for participating. You're getting lots of love.
And thanks to listeners for indulging us and letting us kind of play in that sandbox, because we typically, I would say we typically go for Batman related, especially animated style content. And like we always do, we pull out the psychology and we talk about psychological science, evidence, relationships, all that sort of fun stuff. And there was stuff to talk about, but for the most part, it was a little bit outside of our typical style. So
yeah, and I
had a lot of fun, if that helps.
We did have a lot of fun, and that's something that people talked about in emails and tweets to us, was that we were clearly having a lot of fun, and people actually appreciated hearing an episode where we didn't automatically say that we loved it at the end. So that was it was a little something for everyone. We want to thank you all for taking a listen to it. Now we're coming back to where it all started. The new Batman adventures. I guess technically that's not where it started, but it's where we are now. So there's that. This episode is going to be a lot of fun and I think pretty educational. We are talking about the episode Mean Seasons.
It's another one of those just classic, well-written episodes that comes full circle, and at the end, you know you've seen it before, you're waiting for it, there's the shock, the surprise, and you kind of knew all along, that kind of reward. And the sadness, it's always sad.
Okay, let's not jump ahead. We need to start at the beginning before we get to the end. Let's talk about this episode. Now, what's interesting to me is, having been a lifelong comic book fan, the villain of this particular episode, Calendar Girl, seems to be kind of a stand-in for a classic Batman villain, Calendar Man. Mm-hmm. And I'm not all that versed on why Calendar Girl was chosen over Calendar Man, but I would assume that it's because they didn't want the crimes to be ridiculous. Calendar Man has a tendency to have ridiculous crimes associated to particular holidays. No holiday is safe, and everyone in Gotham basically laughs at him because his crimes have a tendency to be pretty low rent, petty crimes, and his costumes change based on whatever holiday he is interrupting.
I was confusing Calendar Man with Birthday Boy. Birthday Boy is a serial killer, and his methods are extremely grotesque, very violent. I would say he's on the other end of the spectrum. When you said Calendar Man, I was imagining Birthday Boy. I was imagining this image. This is a Earth One image.
No,
and then I forgot that no, Birthday Boy is super scary.
Yeah, and Calendar Man, not that scary.
No.
Let's talk about the episode. We're at a fashion show. It is, of course, springtime. It's very important that we note the dates and the time of year of these crimes. It is a fashion show from Donna Day Fashions, and she is naturally presenting her new spring line to all of the folks who like to oogle and ogle and ooh and ah new
Love
fashions. Yeah, it's right up your alley, right?
Yes.
Well, all of this is interrupted by basically Chippendales dancers.
Yeah, they're like shirtless muscle guys.
Shirtless muscle guys in black
That's
pants.
what I think that's what the wiki
Is it
No.
shirtless muscle guys?
No, it's not.
They're wearing black pants and they're wearing the sort of Chippendales white collar with the black bow tie and the cufflinks, and they've got long hair. So they are buff, muscular, shirtless henchmen, I suppose. In addition, there is a woman, long dark hair, wearing green, and she's got a mask that is just sort of this white mask, sort of, I don't know exactly what style we would go with, but there aren't a lot of features, and that might be for a reason. And they end up disrupting the fashion show, and they end up kidnapping Donna Day, who is the fashion designer. Then later, they end up crashing a auto show, and Calendar Girl is wearing a yellow outfit with a red, white, and blue hat. She's got fireworks in her hands. Clearly, she's going with a whole July 4th motif. She ends up kidnapping Barclay James, who is the president of Gotham Motors or CEO or so. He's a big deal.
There's motivation. There's
Yeah.
intent. She is targeting certain people. She's not only causing disruption and potentially harming people who step in the way, but she is kidnapping people who are running these events. And it's not clear yet, but it is hinted that there is a vendetta. There is a reason why she's targeting these individuals.
Right. And when she goes back to her hideout, there's a moment that I think is interesting where she appears to not have the mask on. We don't see what she looks like, but there's the possibility that she is going to be seen by her henchmen, and she is very upset by that. Let's take a quick listen.
We're ready when you are.
Idiot!
So clearly she's hideously disfigured, a la the Phantom of the Opera, something along those lines.
And not even her closest henchman sees or is allowed to see what she looks like. She's and there's almost this I guess because she's so angry, you can tell. We've done this sort of thing before, primary and secondary emotions. The secondary emotion is anger. She's pissed off. She's she kind of she yells at the guy and I think throws something. But what do you think, Brian? We've done this a couple times before. What do you think her primary emotion is?
Embarrassment.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean,
we can think of a
she's
couple.
angry. Yeah, she's angry, but that anger stems from the embarrassment of whatever she looks like under that mask.
We don't know enough yet, but could be
Right.
embarrassment, could be shame.
Yeah.
Could be fear.
Yeah.
What if they see what I'm truly made of? What if they think I'm horrifying? I don't know, maybe sadness. But again, we don't yet know her whole story. And it's hinted that there is something going on with her appearance. And like you said, the suggestion is that she is disfigured.
And clearly she seems to have some sort of personal vendetta against Donna Day and Barclay James. That's why she's kidnapped them. What I like is that Batgirl is the one who sort of figures out the connection. Batman is teaching her to be a better detective, similar to her father. And she is almost got a kind of an oracle thing going right now because she's left behind at the crime scenes calendar pages with dates circled. And Batgirl has been able to link those two dates and those two companies to a spokesmodel by the name of Paige Monroe, who was at one time a very famous model who had contracts with various fashion lines. Donna Day was one of them. She modeled at car shows. Obviously, Gotham Motors fits into that.
Right. Until both companies announced they were dropping her in favor of a new youth-oriented campaign.
There's a beeline throughout this story. Let's go back to earlier in the day. Bruce is hanging out with Lucius Fox pre-auto show, and they're talking about, at one point, a retirement party for a guy by the name of Bernie Benson. Bernie has been with the company for a long time, and now that he has reached a certain age, which is the mandatory retirement age for Wayne Industries, they are throwing him a party, regardless of whether he actually wants to retire. Mm-hmm. This seems to trigger Bruce a little bit, because Bruce was under the impression he was younger. I think it's because Bruce is now realizing he's getting older. Mm-hmm. And so it's making him question, how much longer do I have doing what I'm doing before I reach a point that people think I should retire?
I think there's a little bit of both perspectives, in the sense of certainly Bruce's awareness that people notice, and people are very vocal, interested, invested, involved in aging. And when people get, so to speak, too old to do their job, too old to drive, too old to function in the ways that they were when society thought they were younger, it's as if there is a mandate. It's as if there is a common agreement that you need to hang up your cape and cowl at some point. So I think there's the awareness of the perception of aging and the perception of being put out to pasture. Mm-hmm. What I mean? Mm-hmm. That idea that you're seen as no longer useful in society. Right. And in our society, at least in Western society, this is a problem, because we know the opposite. We know that as we age, many of us can continue to be high functioning, can contribute to society in various ways, can certainly hold jobs after, I can't remember the age that this episode suggested this man retire, but I remember being surprised, because I think
it was like 60.
Yeah, it was.
Which is kind of a retirement age anyway, but in terms of mandatory retirement, especially when you're, I could see maybe if you're on the police force or something like that, but he's working at Wayne Enterprises. So it's like, what job does he have where he would be forced to retire at 60?
Well, and the other piece of this, of course, is Bruce's own self-perception and his need for perfection, his vanity, his ego. I mean, we know that he believes he is better than most people when it comes to his abilities, his competencies, his strength, his endurance, his own mental wellness, and his physical capacities. So
I'm guessing he's in better shape than Bernie Burnson.
He totally isn't. He's meant to be younger. It's not as if he's close to that age. And I think that this is introducing some difficult ideas that he hasn't had to grasp or consider before. Mm-hmm. Like, when does Batman retire? At what age is he going to have to give up? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is his counterpart in this episode isn't Dick or Tim. We don't know where Tim. I don't even know where Tim is gone.
No,
it's Barbara. It's Barbara. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I like that his counterpart is somebody who is meant to be emotionally intelligent, is meant to be super bright, and isn't introducing those competitive ideas of, I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you, I'm meant to replace you, that sort of thing. But we work together and we help each other and we complement each other.
Mm-hmm. But she is, for sure, showing signs of learning those skills that could adequately replace Batman once he does reach that retirement age. Of course, we all know that a guy like Bruce Wayne is not going to retire when he's supposed to, when it comes to being the Dark Knight.
I think there's a whole series about this.
There very well could be. Maybe we'll see that later. Of course, I'm not sure Barbara's the one that we're going to be focusing on in that series. But so once they make this connection to Paige Monroe, they visit her agent, who explains sort of what happened to her career once she was let go by these two companies. Let's take a quick listen to Irv Kleinman.
After the modeling dried up, I got her a lead in a sitcom. But it never flew. The network wanted younger demographics.
Where is she now?
Dropped out of sight. But there were rumors. You know, the surgeon nipped when he should have tucked.
We're meant to believe, or at least the suggestion is, that things went so badly, that there was an accident, there was a mishap, that disfigured her so severely that she has to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. And so I really dislike the way that this former agent or manager is talking about her when she's not in the room. There is, all these feelings spike for me about women and the pressure that our society puts on us to look a certain way, especially as we get older. So we have to maintain a certain weight. We have to maintain youthfulness. We have to maintain so many elements and qualities that are not actually realistic.
But he's not saying she has to maintain those things. He's saying that she was on a failed sitcom and then then dismayed, she went off and did something to herself.
But his tone is so disparaging. I wonder, the psychologist in me wonders, what would have been like to work with you? Because you sound like you maybe contributed to her feeling inadequate. And perhaps
her GoFundMe account.
Well, it's a whole other episode. But I think that's what we're meant to feel right now is, she didn't want to lose work, and she especially didn't want to lose her beauty and her youthfulness. And she did what we know so many people do in the industry. I almost said our industry. In this industry that we're adjacent to, in the sense of plastic surgery and treatments, rejuvenation, all of these remedies, interventions, surgeries, and in different ways that women and men, but a lot of women will revert to stay relevant.
Right.
Again, this episode still fits. It still feels
relevant.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to this guy, I'm like, yep, of course, he's unhelpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then that leads us to the next abduction, which takes place at the WGBS upfronts, which would be, you've got a perplexed...
What is that? Upfronts?
The upfronts? The upfronts is a media event where the networks bring in the media to take a look at their new lineup of shows.
I would have loved to see any of these shows, by the way.
And in this particular case, their entire lineup seems to be very CW-esque.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of beautiful kids. And... obviously, that's going to tick someone like Paige Monroe off.
Well, and you probably have a better understanding of what was on air during the time that this episode aired with the animated series. Mm-hmm. Because when I saw this particular...
It's probably right around the era of UPN.
Well, I was thinking of like Models, Inc., you remember that show?
You're always thinking of Models, Inc., though. It doesn't even matter what era we're talking about.
I wonder if that's what they were referencing, those kinds of shows where there's a lot of drama. It's like post Melrose Place.
Right.
But it's
in that wheelhouse of Fox and UPN.
And they're all young and model-ish looking. And
right.
But it's all normalized. I think that's really the point, is that
Right.
none of this is realistic, and yet they're making it out to seem a pretty average, normal.
Yeah. It's
kind of lifestyle.
It's the entertainment that you're wanting to watch when you come home and watch pretty people be dramatic. And as a result, Calendar Girl shows up, tries to put the kibosh on that by kidnapping the executive Frederick Fournier. Now, Batman and Batgirl arrive on the scene and end up pursuing Calendar Girl, her henchmen, and something awesome happens. They go into a back lot, and that's where they come across a large mechanical dinosaur. The dinosaur!
Is this the dinosaur?
This is the dinosaur.
I don't know that this is the dinosaur in this.
I think it's got to be the dinosaur.
No. I think you're right, but I don't think that this is not the dinosaur. This is this version of this dinosaur.
I don't know what you mean, but it's a giant mechanical T-Rex that I have a feeling will at some point in time end up in the Batcave along with the giant penny. But I mean, he basically destroys it.
Yeah.
You know, it falls over and, you know,
He probably
heaping
like
wreck.
yeah.
But
he probably fixes
he
it and puts it.
Yeah. Just like he wanted to keep the murder coin, he keeps the almost murder dinosaur. She now has 3 captives. She's got Donna Day. She's got Frederick Fournier. She's got Barclay James. So 3 high-powered people who at one point in time fired her and kept her career from going any further. So now she's decided that there's only one more holiday to celebrate.
The Day of the Dead.
Now she's carrying a big scythe. She's wearing all black. Clearly she's meant to be death. Batman and Batgirl show up. There's another fight. So there's this projector, slide projector, that's been showing images of Paige Monroe. During the fight, it is damaged.
It's slashed through the center. It's basically it's like the metaphor of her disfigurement, I would imagine.
Right. So now her beauty is gone right there on the screen in front of her.
Also superficial.
Yes.
It's just paper.
Yeah. And she gets distracted by that. They easily defeat her. As a result, her mask is removed. And
it's interesting because, and I know you were going to talk, your concern would have been, will they let her have her mask in Arkham?
Maybe. Not really.
Because you complain that
No. I complain that they let people who have weapons and other devices that, like, for instance, Harvey needs his coin to make decisions that are both bad and good. Like, it's not, should I have a sandwich or should I have some chicken? It's, should I kill this person or should I not kill this person?
So you don't believe that the mask is maladaptive or contributes to her.
We're gonna talk about that in a second, because maybe it is. If she is in fact horrific under that mask, would you have a problem with her keeping the mask if she went to Arkham or
I don't
Stonegate?
think I would.
Correct. However, and this is what we're getting at, the mask comes off and they see what is underneath it.
Ah! No! Don't look, please! Oh, no.
She's beautiful.
She can't see that anymore. All she sees are the flaws.
So are you surprised?
No.
You're not surprised.
No.
It's to me, it's one of those Twilight Zone endings, in the direction of we've gone down this into this darkness, like this place of up is down, down is up.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening?
Right.
And we should be disturbed by this because not only is she not disfigured, but she's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I think anyone in that room would acknowledge that she's beautiful. Is she older? Honestly, the way that she's drawn, I can't necessarily tell from the details of the animation, but what we know is that all of this is in her mind. And that is probably the most disturbing part of this. She's created this hell, this horror show for herself. And so what's interesting is that this happens to people.
Right.
This is not fiction.
Yeah.
And so I do want to talk about this mental health condition called body dysmorphic disorder.
Okay.
You've probably heard of this before. I'm not sure that we've talked about it on the show. Body dysmorphic disorder, I'm going to be calling it BDD from this point on, is in the DSM-5, and it's classified now with the obsessive compulsive and related disorders. And one of the reasons for that is that it has a similar feel element, obsessive compulsive dynamic to it, in the sense that there are these intrusive, really upsetting, distressing thoughts, and then some behaviors that are meant to counteract or reduce the anxiety associated with those thoughts. And so very clearly, if Calendar Girl's thoughts are, I'm hideous, I'm disfigured, I'm, no one should look at me, her behavioral response is what?
Just to turn away, cover her face?
Yeah, she's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And so wearing the mask is, I think in this case, more of a metaphor, but certainly a very concrete behavior of trying to shield and keep other people from seeing her defects.
Yeah.
And to avoid the embarrassment, the shame, the anxiety that might be caused if people do see her face. Now, I have worked with persons who have had BDD in a particular treatment clinic. I was doing a lot of work with individuals who had, I would say, moderate to severe BDD to the degree that they had to have therapy 5 times a week for several hours a day. And so in that treatment center, which focused also on OCD, we worked a lot with behavioral and cognitive interventions. And honestly, one of my perceptions in my early years working with this population is that many of them are not only not disfigured, their appearance is usually within normal ranges, which I think is an interesting feature of this disorder. But they're actually, the persons who I worked with, one would consider them really attractive. So for me, I was very surprised to learn, and these are the thoughts that I had, that somebody who's so beautiful, and I can remember one patient in particular. She was about my age. I was probably early 20s at the time, mid 20s. She was about my age. She was, in my eyes, perfect. She was so beautiful to me. She was perfect. And yet she thought that she was so hideous, and she thought that she was essentially broken. She thought that her appearance, she thought that her face had defects. And so it's hard, not just as a practitioner, but as a person who's speaking with her, who's learning more about this. It could be a family member, a friend, somebody who doesn't quite understand at that level just how disparate, just how strange it might be to see this beautiful person and hear them say that they think that they're hideous and ugly and that they can't bear to look in a mirror because they see defects.
Could I ask a really strange follow-up question to that? And go with me on this, because clearly she saw something that wasn't there.
Yeah.
You say that you looked at her and saw that she was beautiful and perfect. How much of body dysmorphia is in your own mind, and how much of it is also in the minds of those who are looking at you? I guess what I'm saying is, can body dysmorphia also exist in your own view of her? Does that make sense? Like how much of that is projection as well? Because you're seeing a beautiful woman. What is the foundation for that? What is that? Is that based on yourself? Was she better looking than you? Is
no,
she,
yes,
you know,
no.
Are
This
you
person,
broken because you're seeing someone complain about being?
Well, okay. So somewhere in your question, I will find meaning.
Thanks.
No, I'm just trying to say that it was very hard for me in the beginning to look at this person who is, in my eyes, perfect. And I will add the word privileged in this case, who I felt was perfect and privileged. And in my mind, in my perception, yes, biased, was the idea that she could pretty much have anything she wanted. And so I had to reconcile my own hangups in order to help her, because the reality is that this is a neurobiological disorder, like depression, like anxiety disorders, like post-traumatic stress disorder. This is something that you cannot tell somebody, just get over it. Look in the mirror, you're beautiful. Look at this photograph, you're beautiful. You cannot convince them that they're beautiful. Because their BDD brain is telling them, oh, this feature is too big. Oh, this is not symmetrical. And to explain a little bit, most of the patients I worked with focused on one or two areas of their body. A lot of times it's a nose, something about the face being asymmetrical. Sometimes it's other parts of the body, issues around a focal point, like, oh, you know, my legs or my hips, or and I want to be very clear, this is beyond, this is hard for us, because a lot of men and women, but a lot of women, as we were talking about earlier in this episode, are judged on their looks. And so we internalize some of those demands. And so we are hard on ourselves, and we tell ourselves we need to be thinner, our hips need to be proportional, our stomachs need to be flat, you know, our hair needs to be straight or straighter, our noses need to be a certain way, you know, like we have, at least in Western society, this idea of what is beautiful, and oftentimes media tells us what that is. And this shouldn't be surprising to anyone. It is one look. This is, you know, if you look at what is in the media, this is one unattainable look to basically strive for. And
how does that change over time? And maybe you don't know.
I mean, this is
like,
sociologically, yes, that can change over time. So, okay, why do I give that context? The women, I can tell you this, the women I worked with were concerned with these body parts: nose, lips, hair. What about the hair? Straighter, thicker, coloring, like certain things about hair color, stomach, legs. And men who I worked with who have BDD are concerned with some of the same things, like facial features, nose especially, and then chin, jawline, skin. So skin is a focal point, something that a lot of my patients were concerned about. And I remember one of my patients telling me, like, their skin was so blotchy and they had so much acne, and they couldn't, they just felt like it was they were so disfigured, and I would stare at them and be like, I don't really even see anything. So, okay, so I was a younger practitioner. I was naive. So I tell these stories because I think that is the extent to which this mental illness is it presents itself with challenges and barriers. You can imagine why people don't come forward, because people will reject them or say you're crazy, or say, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Or worse, how could you? You're beautiful. Like, how could you even think that? Which I think a lot of parents naturally say because they believe they couldn't believe their own child would think that they're disfigured. Mm-hmm. So, I really want to emphasize that this is a real condition. It's based on, like other disorders, on neurobiology, and that it is treatable with therapy and with medication and with social support.
So let's talk about the treatment, because you did say you can't just stick them in front of a mirror and tell them to look at themselves.
Right.
How do you treat someone with BDD? Is it, and I realize you say therapy and medication and, support around them, but get a little more specific.
Yeah.
How do you treat someone with therapy? I realize that there's medication and all that involved, but talk about the therapy itself.
Well, I want to make sure that we know that BDD has to be diagnosed by a mental health practitioner. And actually, I would recommend a specialist in this area of at least OCD and if possible for BDD. And I just want to explain that there are some criteria that should be kept in mind. I'm just going to name these off pretty quickly. You can look this up in the DSM-5. But as I mentioned, there should be a pretty pervasive preoccupation with their own appearance. So they should be pretty bothered, preoccupied, and concerned about a part of their body or multiple parts of their body. And this is important because, especially, again, to talk about gender, especially for women, young women, teenagers, and this does include men, but I want to emphasize the intersection of media influence, development, and gender here, that just being preoccupied with your looks doesn't mean you have BDD. It has to be a significant preoccupation. So you're spending, I'll be concrete, you're spending 2 to 3 hours getting ready. You have to put on 50 to 60 different outfits before it feels right. You are putting on a lot of makeup or spending hours on your hair. And when it comes to surgical procedures, interestingly, where you'll find persons with BDD includes dentists' offices, plastic surgeons' offices, that sort of thing. So multiple excessive procedures, that would be indicative, versus like having a cosmetic procedure once or twice, right? And then repetitive behaviors. So in my experience, this is checking. This is checking the mirror several times. This is grooming behavior several times. It's some people pick at their skin. This is kind of counterintuitive, but they'll actually like pick at themselves and make things worse. That's not their intent, but they can't stop perseverating on it, that they'll actually harm themselves. And then reassurance seeking. Does my hair look okay? Does my skin look okay? Does my nose look too big? Those sort of questions. So you start to see that reassurance seeking. And then, of course, the last thing I want to mention, just like I do with all things, is that we have to consider the impairment or the clinical significance. So is it causing enough distress for this person that it is problematic? It's interfering with their lifestyle, their work, their relationships, their academic functioning, those sorts of things that you have to ask yourselves. So obviously there are certain groups of people that might be more prone to this. Professional athletes, college athletes, dancers. So we cross into the area of eating disorders, of obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety. Those different families clearly blend into this as well. So is it difficult to diagnose? Absolutely. So that's what I would say. You have to start there. And from there, that's when you implement a very individualized treatment. I think it's important to answer the question about treatment with emphasizing what doesn't work.
Okay.
So plastic surgery seems like it would work, but it actually doesn't work.
Right.
So eliminating the problem, making the nose smaller, making the chin wider, breast implants. The interesting thing about BDD is that it is insidious. It is pervasive. And once you fix one thing, it will transform or transport almost into another area. And I've actually worked with people who've had plastic surgery who are incredibly unhappy and either continue to perseverate on that area of their body, or it has jumped, the anxiety, preoccupation has jumped to something else. So highest recommendation is not to try to eliminate the problem through plastic surgery or those sorts of remedies. As far as interventions, the cognitive behavioral approach is usually recommended, and medication is usually recommended as a sort of an added psychopharmacology component to really get to a point of good functioning.
Right.
So I won't go too much into medication. There are SSRIs that are often prescribed for BDD. What is really effective and what I would highly recommend is looking into the therapy component, which includes the cognitive piece, challenging those thoughts that are inaccurate, unrealistic, and not based in reality. So that really has to happen. And the behavioral piece, which is basically asking a person to begin changing their behavior. So avoiding was one of the things I think you mentioned.
Right.
With Calendar Girl. So something that she would need to do is not avoid anymore. So she would have to inevitably take off the mask. Yes, she'd have to take off the mask.
So then would you, as a therapist in Arkham or Stonegate, would you withhold the mask from her?
No, absolutely not. So everything about the therapy is patient-centered and patient-directed. So she would, at first, she would probably need to agree. I don't know how things work in Arkham, but if I were there...
It's very loose.
I know. She would probably, we'd work with her to see if she'd be open to agreeing to gradually work without the mask. So over time, she would have sessions where she would take the mask off and look directly at people in their face. And I actually did a few sessions. I did many sessions this way where it looks like I'm staring at a person and I'll be right up close to their face, staring at them. And it's not simply that I'm staring them down. It's that the client needed to experience that gaze. They needed to experience, yes, at first it's anxiety provoking and it's uncomfortable, but over time they do overcome that and they start to adjust and manage those feelings. And they learn that the consequences aren't so bad and that their irrational beliefs or their distorted beliefs really have no basis.
Right.
And so you can't just tell somebody that. You really have to work with them on that. So some of that involves social interactions. Some of that involves, it depends on where as far as their body is concerned that their BDD is focused on. And some of it involves mirrors where depending on the type of BDD somebody has, you may have them look at a mirror and manage their symptoms by approaching the mirror and spending time with mirrors if they happen to avoid mirrors. If it's the opposite and they can't get away from a mirror and they're spending 3 hours in front of a mirror, then you would pull back from that and you would have them work on limiting that time. So, there's just not enough time in the show to go over the details of this, but I cannot emphasize enough that usually a specialist in this area or in the area of obsessive compulsive and related disorders would be a good fit for somebody who thinks that they might have BDD. In addition to that, a lot of the information from the OCD Foundation, I believe you can just Google International OCD Foundation. You can find a lot of helpful information about BDD, including a little questionnaire. It's the BDDQ, and it provides some questions about preoccupation with appearance, certain behaviors, duration of the symptoms or behaviors, and allows people to do a little bit of a self-assessment and really understand for themselves, oh, is this considered just being unhappy with my appearance, or is this a clinical problem like BDD?
Mm-hmm. So, Drea, a little bit of trivia, a little bit of Hollywood trivia. This isn't necessarily something that is unheard of. I mean, turning to crime as a result might be. I don't know. I didn't really research that. But you know how in the beginning of this series, I would try to throw in like real life occurrences. The voice of Calendar Girl was Celia Ward. No relation. A lot of people know her from the TV show Sisters back in the day. Absolutely beautiful woman. In fact, many times that it's said that she never ages. Something that's interesting is in the late 90s, in 1997, she was turned down for the role, for a role in the Bond movie, Tomorrow Never Dies.
Okay.
And as a result, it led her on this quest because basically she was feeling good about herself. She was feeling beautiful. She was feeling confident. She felt like she could tackle this role. And yet it became very clear to her that anyone over the age of 35 was basically useless in Hollywood. So she went on a mission and did this episode in 1998. And then 2 years after this episode aired in 2000, she created a documentary called The Changing Face of Beauty, which actually focuses on America's fascination or obsession with youth and beauty and what that means and how it changes from one period to another, and how it affects our lives, and how the people in various industries are affected by age and growing old. So it was no accident that Celia Ward was cast as Calendar Girl and that this was her affliction. I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
I would also, you're reminding me of a documentary called Misrepresentation. I think a lot of people know about it, but Misrepresentation is basically a documentary that does a great, thorough job of explaining how the media sells us this idea about femininity, youth, beauty, sexuality, and it's very specific, of course, to women. And here in the show, I simply don't have the time, nor is this really the scope for this kind of thing, but I think would be, what would we say? We would say additional homework, readings, resources. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that movie is recommended as supplemental materials for our A+ PhD
listeners.
Students.
Yeah. So how do you think that this affects Bruce Wayne? Well, he ends up
He's horrified by the idea that she's in such emotional pain.
Right.
Well, and looks the way that she looks.
So when Bernie comes to him in order to basically say, hey, it's my last day, or what is Bruce's response? Let's play it here.
I'm afraid I won't be able to attend your retirement dinner, Bernie.
I understand, sir. You're very busy.
Actually, I've decided to cancel it.
Cancel?
I'm changing the retirement policy. You can work here for as long as you can do the job.
Yes!
Two things strike me with this moment. One, hey, good for you, Bruce. You're letting this guy continue working. You're not putting him out on the street. Yeah, good for you. Two, you can't be doing this on the last day of work, Bruce, because that guy's got plans. He may have already spent some of that money that he's getting as his
Did they hire
retirement.
some? They may have already hired somebody.
He may have been training somebody. His wife and he may be going on some sort of vacation now. Like,
it's so disruptive. All the HR stuff.
Yeah, it's all about Bruce. It's all about him and his own
And he
feelings.
wants to feel better. What was the second thing?
The first thing was, yay, good job. The second thing was...
my second thing is I'm having trouble with the guy being a guy. That why couldn't this have been a woman? Because right now I'm feeling as though Bruce is now perpetuating the idea that as men age, they continue to be high functioning, are valuable, and should stay on and be championed. And yet I thought the lesson he just learned was that women encounter so much negativity and criticism and go through such lengths, and in this case into this mental illness essentially, because of what she's had to go through.
But how much of that is projecting?
A lot of it is projecting.
You're a woman, so you're projecting.
No, I'm a little upset that
for him it was more about ageism. It didn't really have anything to do with her.
I get it. I agree with that part, and I think that it could have helped for that character, that employee, to be female.
You don't think that would have been necessarily sort of condescending to the... I've just learned a lesson.
I don't know.
Susan, you don't have to retire.
The good thing...
You're not fired, Susan.
Yeah. I think the good thing about this particular show, its own universe, is that you have older women, like his doctor and certain characters that are very powerful, valuable, and represent, I think, a good amount of diverse female insight and representation. But what bothered me about this ending is that we see this woman suffer, and the end result is this man gets to work more years of his life and have fulfillment and gets this validation that he's valuable to society.
Right, but
Bruce.
So then let me ask the question.
You really screwed up, Bruce.
No, but hold on. Let me ask this serious question then. Is dysmorphia something that is it something that can be triggered? Can simply being fired from her job at the age of 35, then could that trigger dysmorphia? Because I think for him, his lesson was more about ageism, but for her, she had body dysmorphia, which is entirely separate.
I do not want to get to confuse those things, and you are correct. She, to answer your first question, is it possible for someone in their 50s, 60s, 70s to develop body dysmorphic disorder? Yeah, I think so, but it's a rare thing in those years as far as development of mental health issues goes. There would be signs of it earlier. However, you are correct in that these are two separate issues being explored. And again, I think for me, I'm just left with that feeling of, well, you championed this man, this older gentleman. And maybe
I think it would have been just from a writer's perspective. This is totally show, the context of the show is completely thrown out the window. From a writer's perspective, it might have been weird for the writer to have begun the episode with, well, we're refusing or we're forcing Kathleen into retirement because she's hit 60.
Right.
Like I think it was probably easier to slide in that Bernie was being let go than it would be, to navigate the whole minefield that is we're letting women go at the age of 60 but not men, whatever. Like I think I just from a writer's perspective for an animated series, I think that's probably why they chose a man not necessarily to undercut the meaning that
Sure.
was gained.
And I think that the real point here is that Bruce himself
Yeah.
grew and developed, and in his older age was able to
Ruin some old man's vacation, retirement vacation.
He was able to shift in some of his ideals in order to help somebody. So that's good.
Yeah, it is good. Drea, let's get back to our old days where we liked every episode. What did you think of this one?
I loved this episode. You knew I would love it. I love the fashion show. I love the social commentary. I love the gender issues. I love the mental health issues. I love the sadness at the end. We're left understanding. Sick. No, I think it's a sadness that I think is appropriate, and I think leaves us realizing that this sort of thing is irreversible, that some parts of this will be haunted with. And so there's the lesson for us. How do we correct this in our own lives? I think that's, some of these episodes end sadly, but I think it's for us to take on in our lives and make change and shift and transform in ways that are positive and are more intelligent. So yeah, that's why I like the sadness. Bud.
Well, I'll let you have that.
Did you like it?
I did like it. I liked it a lot. I think as has been the case with several episodes, I've liked the endings, and the endings have made me appreciate the episodes more than the episodes themselves. Calendar Girl going from event to event, changing costumes based on holidays, was not necessarily as exciting for me. But I did like the sort of adult storytelling revolving around Bernie, and the fact that, you know, this is a show ostensibly for kids, but they're introducing this idea of like forced retirement age.
Oh,
you know,
you're
like,
right.
You know,
you're right.
like,
These themes are, I would imagine, for kids, just like, how do they connect with this? I did as a kid, so I'm not criticizing it in that way, but you're absolutely right. Some of course, some of the scenes with issues about employment, retirement, business ownership, entrepreneurship, like some of this other stuff that's going on is a little bit above some of our youth's heads, but maybe not. Maybe this is what shaped some of us.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, not a criticism. And all I had written down on my notes was, what year is this? ?
Well, it aired in 1998. So
yeah,
there's that. By the way, did you notice that in the upfronts, the television shows were all in color? So now we're in a world where color TV certainly exists. So maybe it's just that Gotham just has a bunch of really bad black and white TVs around town, because we've got DVDs and we've got color. So you know, either things are progressing in Gotham City, or most residents of Gotham just have really crappy black and white televisions.
It could be the haves and have-nots. Like perhaps that gap is meant to be pretty emphasized.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. Next week, come and join us for another insightful episode.
I want to give a Twitter shout out to our listener, Dr. Jerome Anderson, who's sent us a few notes and a picture of him riding his motorcycle down the road and listening to the Arkham sessions. And I have to say, so I have two things to say. One is, thank you so much, Dr. J, for listening to the show and for giving us some of your thoughts. It's so awesome. And then the second thing I have to say is, you are officially too metal for us. Like, this picture tells me that you are way awesome, way cool, and I'm not sure that we can match that.
So what you're saying is, are you suggesting that doctors can't that nerds can't be metal. You can't be metal, but
Oh, no, don't get me wrong.
he's not too metal for me.
No, I'm metal. Let's be clear.
You are metal.
But yeah, no, I really love it. I love the picture, and I hope that we live up to his expectations and that we continue to entertain and provide joy for him. And I think it looks awesome. So for folks who want to check out his awesome picture, it is Dr. J is at JDAE13. And if you have any pictures of yourselves listening to the Arkham sessions, please send them our way.
Rev Sully does it on a regular basis. In fact, you know what? We just retweeted Dr. J. So you can even go to our Twitter page and check out his awesome photo as well, which you can find at Arkham Sessions. Drea, where can they find you?
At Arkham Asylum Doc on Twitter, Arkham Asylum Doc on Instagram. My website is underthemaskonline.com. Brian, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028. You can find me on Instagram. I am at b_ward028. And you can find our family over at fanbase_press on Twitter. Fanbase Press is awesome. Go check out their website, fanbasepress.com, for information on appearances and signings and upcoming events and, of course, all of their great comics. You can also email us anytime you like. It is arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Come follow us on Twitter. And engage, because we like to talk to new listeners, old listeners. We like to retweet you. We like to just have all these conversations. Until next week, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Meeting's been canceled.